Okay, we'll call to order the Local Agency Formation Commission meeting. Please conduct the roll call.
Thank you. Commissioner Orth? Here. Commissioner Rosenberg? Here. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Here.
Commissioner Huff?
Here.
Commissioner Ignacio?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Commissioner Brown? Chair Brown?
Here. Thank you.
Apologies from Commissioners McCowan and Ward.
Okay, are you being heard on the mic?
It's on.
Okay. Sound.
You can't hear. Okay.
And I would like to remind commissioners to turn on your mics as well.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, you're good to go? All righty. It's time for public expression for items not appearing on the agenda. Anyone that would like to speak under public expression, please come forward, state your name for the record, and know you will have 3 minutes. Seeing no one come forward, do you want to fix the mic on the speak? Yes.
I think it just came on. I think it's on.
Oh, there you go.
And he'll turn it on.
Okay, thank you. All righty, moving on, other business. We have an introduction of our new LAFCo clerk. So Uma?
Thank you. Very pleased to announce that we have a new clerk, Henman & Associates Consulting, hired Kristen Meadows. She is local, been born and raised in the Ukiah Valley area. She has over 10 years of experience in administrative assistance, business management, and community outreach. So we're thrilled to have her on board. She does have a bachelor's from Chico State in journalism and public relations. So,
Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you on board. Appreciate it. You'll get to know all of us, and we'll get to know you. It's great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. And we have 4A, 4B, approval of the September 9th regular meeting summary, and approval of the September 2019 claims and financial report. Uma, do you have any comment?
I have nothing to add other than the claims and reports have been sent to Treasurer Ward, and I did not receive any comments from him before today.
Okay, and I did not receive any comments either from the treasurer for the financials. On the minutes, I'm not sure if it's correction or not, but if you go to page 4, and it was Commissioner McCowan offered the following edits for the report. It is the second bullet point. Is that negotiation or negotiates? Is that correct?
I believe it's negotiates.
Okay.
That's correct, yes.
All righty.
Madam
No-
Chair,
Yes,
if there
sir.
are no other edits, I would like to move that the consent calendar be received as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion and a second. Please conduct a roll call vote.
Commissioner Orth?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Huff?
Yes.
Commissioner Ignacio?
Yes?
Chair Brown?
Yes. Okay, moving forward to item number 5, public hearing. Public hearings are scheduled for commission consideration and possible adoption of items, questions, and comments from the commission. Participating agencies and members of the public are welcome. The documents have been available on the website, and I would like to explain before we begin the public process what the procedure is for it. Staff presents their report and then responds to the commission's questions. The applicant will be given 10 minutes to present and respond to commission questions. The district, in this case, will be given 10 minutes to present and respond to commission questions. The public will then be given 3 minutes per person to speak, and commissioners may ask questions of the public. After public comment, it will come back to the commission, and the commission at that time can ask additional questions of staff, and Then the commission will decide whether we close the public hearing or not. And once the public hearing is closed, the matter is before only the commission, and the commission can make a motion at that time. So we will begin.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I feel I need to recuse myself from this as an employee of the healthcare district.
Okay, so you have a conflict of interest,
Yes.
sir? Thank you very much, and you'll have to leave.
Madam Chair. thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
I also work for the hospital district, so I'll have to recuse myself. I'm an alternate.
Okay. I think you both have to leave the room,
Okay,
leave the hearing itself.
okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, this public hearing is for the Weger Detachment from the Mendocino Coast Healthcare District, LAFCo file number D-2019-01. And it is called to order. So we will begin by asking the executive officer, has proper notice been established?
It has, and there is proof of publication in the packet.
Okay. We're going to begin with our executive officer presenting the staff report. Please go forward.
Thank you. We have our analyst Larkin Filer here, who will be presenting.
I'm sorry, I do need to interrupt you.
Sure.
Because I believe we've been presented with additional written report, information, correspondence, and have we had telephone calls?
Yes, thank you. We have received two comment letters by email. One from Rob Leonard and one from the law offices of Atkinson, Andelson, Loya, Rude, and Romo on behalf of the Mendocino Coast Healthcare District. Those have been provided to the commissioners, and you have hard copies in front of you. We also received a phone call from Mr. Barry Vogel, who is here to speak for himself today.
Okay, all righty. So commissioners, you all have the correspondence, copies of it? Okay. So, sorry about that, but the public hearing is open. Will you please give the staff report?
Thank you. So based on the comment letter that was received, we did reach out to County Council, or I'm sorry, LAFCo Council, and he did review the letters, and staff is recommending that we continue the public item. So that will be a change to our staff report. And then our analyst, Larkin Filer, will be presenting the remainder of the staff report.
Thank you. Larkin?
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, restate your name for the record, please.
This is Larkin Filer, analyst from Mendocino LAFCo. And this is a landowner petition-initiated application to detach approximately 3,500 acres from the Mendocino Coast Healthcare District. The petitioner's primary reasons for the proposed detachment are: the detachment area receives ambulance and medical services from the Ukiah Valley area instead of the district, and the parcel tax invoked by the passage of Measure C imposes an unfair burden. The district states that it provides some ambulance dispatch services to the proposed detachment area, and there are Measure C parcel tax exemptions available to all property owners within the district. The district did not state that it provides medical services to the proposed detachment area. Therefore, staff focused on the provision of ambulance services. As background, ambulance services are part of the countywide Emergency Medical Services, or EMS system, which includes paramedic treatment, ambulance transport, and hospital care. The dispatch of EMS is complex and dynamic and is based on computer-aided dispatch, which is based on dispatch algorithms or rules from regularly updated system status plan for Mendocino County. Therefore, boundary lines are not the basis of dispatch protocols for determining the appropriate resource for for a given 911 call for emergency medical services. Based on 8 years of EMS dispatch data within the proposed detachment area and within 2 miles of the proposed detachment area, the district's ambulance service responded to 11 or 6% of the total service calls within that time period. This EMS dispatch data shows that primarily inland and secondarily air ambulance providers routinely serve the proposed detachment area and adjacent areas. In regard to the effects of the proposed detachment, first, voters and landowners in the proposed detachment area would lose their election and representation rights, and there would be no change to the rights for voters and landowners that remain within the district. Second, approximately 18 acres of an 1,100-acre parcel would remain within the district boundary based on the proposed detachment area boundary. Third, landowners within the proposed detachment area would continue to pay for the district's existing general obligation bonds, but would not pay the Measure C parcel tax because those funds are for the purpose of hospital operations and maintenance, which is not subject to Government Code Section 57354. The maximum estimated revenue loss for Measure C parcel tax is approximately $60,000, which is minor in comparison to the district's approximately $40 million annual operating budget, of which approximately $1 million is property tax revenue, based on the 2014 MSR prepared for the district. The detachment area represents a small portion of the overall district boundary, which is approximately 8% of the total land area and approximately 3% of the total assessor parcel numbers, and is primarily comprised of private timber holdings and public land. Approval of the detachment application would not preclude the district from continuing as an agency or make the district insolvent, but would reduce non-debt service financial resources, potentially affecting ongoing sustainability of those services. The district currently has a coterminous sphere of influence, and if the detachment application is approved, staff would amend the district's SOI accordingly during the next MSR SOI update process. And as Uma mentioned, staff has changed its recommendation, which is to continue this public hearing to the November 4th meeting of the commission. Thank you.
Questions, commissioners? Commissioner,
More of a procedural thing. Would it be appropriate to listen to some of the folks that came today in case they're not able to come, or would be?
we're gonna, that will be under public comment,
Yeah, that's,
but questions to the staff report?
no.
I do have, not really a question, but a statement. Under Government Code 57354, which was in your report, requires that landowners within the proposed detachment area remain responsible for their share of debt that the district has incurred up to the date of the detachment. And that would be for general obligation bonds that the district has. Can you explain that further for me?
So any general obligation bonds that are basically in effect up until the date that detachment is effectively, I believe it's the filing of the certificate of completion. So up until that point, any obligations, whether it's general obligation or any other contracts or things of that nature that are related to debt service, would be required to continue to be paid by those landowners.
Besides the general obligation bonds, are there any other charges to landowners wishing to be detached?
Not that we have identified so far, but part of the process is that if approved, the detachment would then go through a process with the Auditor Controller's Office, and they would effectively determine any funds that would need to continue to be paid pursuant to this code section, and then they would work out an arrangement, a time frame to pay back those funds and the amount per year. So we don't really have that information up front. It would just be a process that would occur after potential approval of the project.
After any action?
Exactly.
All righty. Anyone else? Seeing no one, as I explained about the procedures, at the discretion of the chair, the applicant will be given 10 minutes to present and respond to commission questions. So a representative for the detachment, please come forward. You'll need to state your name for the record, and no, you'll have 10 minutes.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I'm Lisa Weger. I think by now you're probably tired of seeing me. Before I begin, I want to thank you first for hearing us today. And secondly, I want to thank Uma and Larkin for doing an excellent job on the staff report. They, obviously, these are complicated documents. They did a very thorough analysis. And I was very pleased with the product, and I'm sure you were as well. As you know, I'm a landowner, and we have brought this petition for exactly the reasons that Larkin just said. And I think, unfortunately, I still have my old map, but I wanted to bring out the map again because I think that it says it best. I think it's a very simple analysis of why we want to be detached from the Mendocino Coast Hospital District. And again, and I know you have another better map in your staff report, but again, I think this just dramatizes. Here's Fort Bragg, here's Compshe, here's the area that we're seeking to detach, here's Ukiah. We'll turn it around. Again, Fort Bragg, Compshe, Ukiah, the area for detachment. Originally, the reason, well, more than 50 years ago, this area was included in the Mendocino Coast Hospital District because it was part of the Compshe School District. And so when they were setting up the boundary, they just sort of drop-boxed, if you will, the boundaries of the school district into the hospital district without regard to where those people would be using hospital services, because clearly, the people in this area are much closer to Ukiah and will be using the services, have been, always will be using the services in Ukiah. So we'll sort of fast forward to the passage of Measure C. That's when I think we all realized that we were going to be paying for a hospital that we didn't use. We felt it was unfair. And at that time, we contacted and met first with you to bring this subject up and to understand what our remedies might be, and then with the hospital. And I'll get back to that in a minute. The petition that I sent around to fellow landowners was signed by 33 of the landowners, which represented almost 20,000 of the 36,000 acres that are being detached. And I have those petitions in my file here. They were also, copies were sent to Larkin. And so I think it's a pretty resounding support when 26 of 36,000 acres were represented by people who wanted to be detached. So the other subject that I did want to address briefly this morning, I had not originally planned to, was Mr. Jeffrey Fry's letter that he emailed to the staff on Friday at 3:30. And he was asking that this proceeding be postponed, which I think the final decision may be postponed. But I was a little disturbed at the last-minute nature of this letter. Two of the claims that he made in his letter, essentially his letter made two claims. The first was that the hospital didn't have adequate notice of this detachment, and they were caught unawares when they received the full staff report. That's simply not true. I met with the hospital on January 10th of this year. The initial pre-application memorandum that was prepared and sent out to everyone stated that we were seeking a detachment, and it also stated that it was intended that a categorical exemption from CEQA would be available. That there were certain questions that were prompted, in fact, in line with the questions that you asked earlier about what taxes would specifically be removed if we proceeded with a detachment. And so we sought an opinion from the auditor. And so a revised memorandum was then provided in May. And again, the hospital fully was fully aware of the detachment and the proceedings. They were fully aware that the CEQA issue was going to be that a categorical exemption was, it was intended that a categorical exemption was available and would be employed. Anyway, as to the actual CEQA issue, I think that we should remember that, and I will, there's sort of two parts to this. One is that Mr. Fry's letter continues to call the CEQA reference in the staff report not a customary, but a common sense exemption. The words he uses and then the citations that he used are for a common sense exemption. We don't have a common sense exemption here. It's a categorical exemption. It's one of the exemptions that's provided for in the statutes and the regulations that support CEQA. And in those regulations, for projects that are not in any way impacting the environment, you are entitled to seek a categorical exemption, which we did, which is included as Attachment 8 in your packet, and which was completely addressed by Mendocino County Department of Planning. And that is their job, to look at that, to analyze it, and to make a decision. And they did. And it's not their job. When you do a categorical exemption, that's supposed to cost the petitioner a few $100s. If there are complicated issues about whether or not CEQA applies, then you have to do a much more in-depth analysis, which is not required in this situation. And I think to just also step back and use our own common sense here for just a moment, and I included this information to the board in my January 21st letter to you, but, and now of course I can't read the writing because it's so little and my eyes are so bad, so I have it written here, just one second. So CEQA is invoked if there's a project, and a project is, and the language that actually is in the statute says that there's a direct physical change to the environment or a foreseeable indirect physical change. What we're doing here, what we're proposing to do here, is we're drawing a line on a map. There will not be any change to the environment. There will not be any change to the water, the animals, the dirt, nothing. We're drawing a line on a map, and it's as simple as that. And those are the sorts of instances where categorical exemptions by statute set out by the state are entitled to be relied upon. Anyway, we'll move on here. I guess the only thing I'm disappointed that we can't decide it today, but I understand that these things sometimes come up. In conclusion, though, I support the staff's recommendations, and again, I appreciate what a good job they've done. So, thank you. Do you have questions of me?
Commissioners?
I have one.
Sure.
And I know the history with this is, when did the original hospital district, the initial formation?
1966.
So it probably predates a lot of folks buying property there then.
It does. It was invoked it formed in 1966, and there are general obligation bonds on our tax bills, but they're extremely minor. And we understand and agree that those general obligation bonds will remain on our tax bill. So it's been a long time. Obviously, none of us were around to either protest or oversee whether or not it was a good idea to have included this huge eastern area in the hospital district.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I have one. With regards to this proposed de-annexation, you mentioned that the services that those properties, the medical services that they seek would be in the Ukiah Valley, and I'd just like you to confirm for me that the path of travel from the Comshy area would be over Comshy Ukiah Road to get to those services?
Yes. So
Okay.
from our ranch, for example, it's roughly 32 minutes to Ukiah. It's at least that far to Compshe, and then from Compshe to Fort Bragg is another 40 minutes. So it's an hour and 20 minutes, would be an hour and 20 minutes to get to a hospital in Fort Bragg, and it would be 32 minutes for us to drive to Ukiah. And so naturally, if you're emergently ill or hurt or something and need a doctor, you're not going to go, and it is on the Compshe-Ukiah Road or the Ore Springs Road. So you take the Ore Springs Road to Compshe, and then you take it on to Mendocino, and then from Mendocino you turn north and go into Fort Bragg, and then you go to the hospital.
One more question.
Sure.
What ambulance services the area right now that,
So there's actually a letter I wrote the board in, I think in January. But originally, they had envisioned that the ambulance services would come from the coast. And I spoke with the person who was, he no longer is, but who was the fire chief in Compshe for 30 years. And he said originally in the area, so do you know where Low Graph Road comes into the Compshe-Ukiah Road?
yes.
Okay. So originally, they went further east than that, and they got tired of waiting for the Coast Hospital because they're all volunteers. So they spoke with dispatch, and they decided that the theoretical cutoff was at milepost 21, which is roughly where the Low Gap Road comes in. And we have used the section line closest to that as the demarcation. And since they decided that, as in informal fashion. What was really interesting and what I thought was extremely thorough about this is that in the staff report, they go into a great deal of detail and actually analyze how often the ambulance service comes from the coast to our area. And when they did specifically our area, it was 6% of the calls. And when they did our area plus 2 miles on each side, it was 10% of the calls, and the remaining times was, and the dominant number of times was answered from the Ukiah area and or from air service.
That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I see none, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So at this time, I'd like to call a speaker from the district to come forward and speak. And know you'll have the same 10 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Wayne Allen. I'm the CEO at Mendocino Coast District Hospital. I received the staff report on October 2nd and Wednesday afternoon. I've not had sufficient time to review it. I've not had sufficient time to gather a board meeting to review it, discuss it, and make a decision. So the Healthcare District Board has not have an official position on this issue yet. I respectfully request a postponement for at least 1 month where I can do my fact-finding, discussion, and have conversations with the Healthcare District Board. And I think Davey Beek has a comment about what he just heard.
Sir, hang on, please. I want to ask you, then you were not part of the previous discussions about a possible detachment that have been occurring for the last probably 10 months?
Was part of those discussions, yes. But then there was a staff report that I received on Wednesday afternoon that was quite shocking, very disappointing to me. And so it kind of pulled the rug out from underneath those discussions.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, sir.
Could you just tell us how long you've been CEO for the hospital?
Yes. Pardon me?
How long have you held your position as CEO at the hospital?
It's my third time I've been at the hospital. I was there from 2006 to 2008. I left, and they called me back from 2011 to 2014. I left, and I returned on April 1st of 2018 to do 2019.
Okay.
So I've been there about 6 months now.
So you personally were not present during the January 10th meeting that the applicant
No.
spoke of? All right, thank you.
Seeing no other, the district can still have a part of their time, and the gentleman that was coming up can come up and state his name for the record.
Good morning, y'all. So I actually do work at the district. I run the ambulance service, and I'm
State your name for the record.
Davey Beek, and I am also the fire chief out in Comshy. And I think it's important to note that when you're looking at the numbers, that the population concentration on that parcel is to the east. But that doesn't mean that the Comshy Volunteer Fire Department and the Coast District Ambulance doesn't respond to that district. Our county uses dynamic staffing. So depending on resources in the valley, we get dispatched. We've run calls out in that stretch of property as well. So it's important to note that currently the staffing on the coast, ambulance-wise, is much stronger and much more, a lot more availability of units than in the corridor, which is dramatically underserved at this point in our history. So that, I think, needs to be part of the decision-making process. Also, the proposed detachment won't cause any of the population to be served any less by us. We're still compelled as an emergency dispatch service to respond. We just won't be getting support from them. So I think that's important. The people that are proposing the detachment will also be served by our hospital and just are choosing not to support our hospital. I think that's important to note. I personally, if you look at road conditions going west and going east, the roads to the west are in dramatically better shape than the roads to the east. And if you are being transported with a hip fracture or an orthopedic injury of some kind, you're way better off going towards the coast. That said, the time and distance study, I'd love to see a real time and distance study done before this decision is made. An ambulance departs Coast Hospital, an ambulance departs UVMC, and they meet in the middle. Has that been done? Has there
Sir,
been
you are addressing the commission, not staff.
I'm sorry. Has that been done? Does anybody know?
Continue your testimony, sir.
Okay. Well, that's really all I have to say, frankly, is that before a decision is made on a secession from the healthcare district, we need to know who would respond in a very real way. Okay. And you'll make the best decisions, I'm sure.
Okay, hang on for questions.
When an ambulance is called, can the patient or the patient's family request where they want the patient to be sent?
Yes, they can.
So your ambulance could very well be called to this area and asked to be taken to Ukiah, is that right?
Yes, they could.
Does that happen frequently?
Nobody goes out into that area frequently. I mean,
Okay.
the population, there's just not much population out there. No, but they would certainly have that option. And particularly in that zone, because it really is a gray area between two healthcare districts.
Thank you.
So as a follow-up question, if the coastal ambulance is the one that responds, and they have to go to the UVMC at the request of the patient, what ambulance service does that leave for the entire coastal area?
Well, what would happen is, since it's a dynamic system, if we were requested to transport a patient to Ukiah, ideally, if the valley had a unit available, if the corridor, the 101 corridor, Ukiah, Willits, had an ambulance available, that would then backstaff over Highway 20 to serve the coast.
Okay.
There would be a rotation.
So you stated at the beginning you are the fire chief for Comshy,
Yes, ma'am.
and that you also are the executive of the ambulance service?
Transport manager, yes, ma'am.
Transport manager.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also should note that I sent a letter to Ms. Thurman, is it? I'm sorry? Henman. Dated, I think it was January of 19 or of 18, wherein I was asked by our past CEO to investigate who would respond to this area. And my best way to figure out that answer to that question was to call Howard Forest and have a medical unit dispatched to an address in that zone. And when I called the dispatch center and I said I had a medical emergency at 18,000, I'm sorry, I don't have the letter on me, but at 18,000 some odd address in Ore Valley, the dispatch center dispatched Compsey Fire and Fort Bragg Ambulance.
Okay, any other questions? The speaker?
Yes, is the protocol generally the closest ambulance is to respond to meet the 1 hour window that is attempted to be met by the longest runs?
Yeah. The golden hour, is that what you're speaking of? Okay, so yeah, absolutely. The closest ambulance is, well, based on drive time, road conditions, and typically we try to dispatch more than one unit. Redundancy is the key to pulling this stuff off. So yeah, absolutely. It's about time and expedience and available units,
And follow-up, is consideration given to the type of call, whether it's a, quote, fall versus a stroke or heart attack?
Not particularly, and in that particular zone, a ground ambulance would be dispatched, and in any cases, except for the most minor reported injury, an air helicopter would also be dispatched. And ideally, in that area, the best way out of there is obviously by helicopter, and we're very well served if weather permits, right?
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Follow-up.
Yes.
Out of the ground ambulance transports, we have data that's been provided in this report. Do you disagree with any of the data that you've seen in there as far as percentages? That's my first question.
Okay.
And then the second question, being chief, you're obviously there, and thank you for your service on the coast. Out of the air transports out of this detachment area, how many of those air transports result in medical services or landings in Mendocino Coast Hospital versus Ukiah Valley or elsewhere?
Elsewhere would generally be the destination. I could safely say that elsewhere would anything trauma related, anything stroke related, anything seriously cardiac related would all end up at our trauma receiving or STEMI receiving hospitals in Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital. I don't have data to support the finding or disprove the findings of call volume. But what I do know is that the population on that property, on that contiguous property, is definitely on the eastern edge, right? So the larger property owners, the population is basically more to the east than it is to the west on that property.
So as you said, the emergency calls are best served by air ambulance for expediency.
Absolutely.
The information that we're provided initially indicates that 40% of the EMS dispatches are with helicopter involvement.
Yeah.
I need an answer to the question, how many of those air transports from that detachment area end up in Fort Bragg?
0.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner?
Again, thank you for your service. My prior role was as a police officer. And I'll be blunt, I used to sit there and kind of decide in my own mind, and it carried over into my family's consideration as to who would transport and where. If I got shot, where would I end up if I was on the eastern edge? Would I end up at UVMC? Or would I end up on the coast?
Yeah.
And the reality is that in those sort of critical things, I kind of look at that as the most horrendous thing that could happen.
Yeah.
And given that most of the time in my career that come wintertime, the air ambulance couldn't land. It was always ground transport. And given that scenario I just gave you, would I be transported to UVMC, or would I be taking the long road back over to the coast?
Well, in all likelihood, and I think it's important to note that helicopter wouldn't land at UVMC any more likely than it would land at the Coast Hospital. It would go to Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital.
Well-
Right, so I mean, you're talking about two sides of a coin, but you're actually going to end up in Santa Rosa with any significant injury.
Well, but most of the time they couldn't land because of the weather.
Yes, so in all likelihood, you'd either be stabilized, depending on where you were, at the nearest receiving, and then
Which would be where?
depending on where you were. If you were at the Weger property, it depends who could get in and who could get there the fastest. And depending on the snow coverage in the Ore Mountains between here and Ore Valley, or snow cover, I mean, rain, sleet, hail, and snow, trees in the road, who knows where you would end up. But where you would end up is someplace to get stabilized, and you'd end up at the trauma center, ultimately, in Santa Rosa.
Okay.
So it's built on redundancy, and so all areas are served from multiple directions, and that's what makes us safe in this rural district. You can't say everything's going to come from the coast, and you cannot say that everything's going to come from the Inland Valley. It depends on availability and road conditions, criticality of nature of the call. It's dynamic, and to put solid, definitive.
I have another question. If the event this ended up, and obviously it looks like we're going to push the final decision down, but I guess my question would be regarding your dispatch services, because you dispatch out of your hospital, is that correct?
No, we dispatch from Howard Forest.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's a
they're all
county-wide
Howard.
dispatch
Okay,
service.
which is what I thought, but
Yeah.
the way you were sounding, it sounded like you were making decisions on the coast for, no. Okay.
They ultimately, Howard Forest would decide what unit was trans.
Okay, so Howard would
Yeah.
continue, okay.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was what I was going to
Yeah.
clarify.
Okay.
Follow-up.
Yes,
You
sir.
When asked earlier by Commissioner Brown about what happens to the ambulance service if there's a unit committed, you have more than one ambulance at Coast Hospital?
Yes, we have 3 ambulances.
All right, I just wanted to make sure
And-
that was made clear.
And it's important to note that sometimes the entire valley is currently covered by 2 ambulances. From Hopland to Laytonville, currently, there is often 2 and sometimes 1 ambulance covering that entire district. At the coast, we have a smaller call volume
Sir.
and a more robust system.
I think we know that. You've responded to our question. Your time is up.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Unless there's more questions. Okay. All righty. So, moving forward, we're now going to open for further public comment to individuals that would like to speak. When you come forward, please state your name for the record and know you have no more than 3 minutes. So, I'd like to entertain a speaker. Please come forward.
Good morning. My name is Charlotte Jacobs, and thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Lisa, for all the work she's done on this project. I live at 12345 Ore Springs Road, and I represent 3 households, actually, within 10 miles of Ukiah. Personally, if I was going to be injured and needing transport by ground, I would like to go to Ukiah, even though the road is very bad going down there. It's a lot faster, of course. It's 25, 30 minutes, as we've been all told. And it's an hour and 20 minutes the other way. I just wanted to, I heard earlier this morning that it's a monetary issue here too, and it's very minimal, the burden that this detachment will take on the district. Whatever it was, 60,000 versus 4 million, whatever. So that's basically what we're talking about is money. Let's see. Also, when you're being transported, if you're being transported, a lot of the transportation is going to be by helicopter to Santa Rosa. I wanted to point out that I don't think I pay taxes for anything that's Santa Rosa. I don't pay taxes for Santa Rosa, and I don't, really feel that I need to pay whatever, monies that need to go to the district. I want the detachment, in other words, I mean, the triad there of Ukiah, Fort Bragg, and Santa Rosa, we just want to be able to have to pay for what what we're using, and that would be Ukiah mostly, and if it's transport to Santa Rosa, we transport to Santa Rosa. Anyway, I support the detachment, I support Lisa and her efforts, and I hope you can vote this detachment. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Ma'am, there's a question of one of the commissioners.
Okay, yes.
Ms. Jacobs, the address that you gave for Orr Springs Road, is that inside the detachment area?
Yes, oh yes.
All right.
1255, 12501, and across the street's 1300, and we're all within the 10 miles of
Okay,
Ukiah.
thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Anyone else, please come forward, take a seat in the front row so you can be next, following this speaker.
Good morning. Thank you all for taking our comment today. My name is James Weger Hodge, and my property is a little further west of Lisa's property. I live closer to Ukiah. Our property basically is slightly east and slightly west of Orr Springs. And one of the two things I want to talk about today, one is communication and the other is distance. So much of our property, there's no phone service. Where are you going to call an ambulance? There's no cell coverage. This guy doesn't work. Right? You're down in the valley, a lot of those places, it doesn't work. So the notion of calling an ambulance for some things, first of all, a lot of accidents that happen, whether it's you turn over a quad and get cut up, maybe break your leg, some of those things, they're not life-threatening. You're going to drive to the nearest medical care. And in my family, the accidents that have occurred over the years have all ended up in Ukiah, not Fort Bragg. It's 3 times as far to Fort Bragg from our property as it is to Ukiah. And to your point about being shot, so if there was no ambulance by air and you were transported and there was a good chance that you were going to go on to someplace for further care, whether that would be cardiac, orthopedic, stroke, you name it, you're going to want to be leaving from Ukiah to Santa Rosa, not from the coast to Santa Rosa, especially if you can't go by air ambulance and you're going on the ground because of weather. You're going to want to be far closer to that. A few years ago, my mother-in-law was with us. She had a stroke. She had to get the clot buster within 30 minutes. If you don't, your symptoms are going to continue and you'll possibly die. Because she got to a close-by hospital, got the clot buster, she was then air flighted out to go to a much bigger operation in Reno, actually. So that saved her life. She lived several more years after that. At the time she had a stroke, she couldn't speak. The left side of her face drooped. The left side of her body didn't work. When she got to the hospital, she couldn't answer questions. So if she hadn't been with us, if we hadn't gotten immediate care, then she wouldn't have lasted much longer. So again, I'll just say that distance, first of all, communication, the lack of communication, we can't always call. So when that happens, we're going to go by car probably. And if we were going to someplace and then calling an ambulance, we'd move toward Ukiah, not toward Fort Bragg. So to me, this is like really, really clear cut as far as where we want to go for services. And the other part is taxation. So many of us that are in the room have property here and we spend part of our lives here. But the fact is we vote in other counties, Sonoma County, Lake County. I live in Lassen County. So we have no opportunity to vote against this operation, nor do we get the material related to such activity. So I'm just going to appeal to your sense of fair play here, that for us to be much closer to Ukiah is more of an issue than getting us all the way out to Fort Bragg. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
One moment.
Yeah.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next speaker, please come forward, state your name for the record.
Tom Madden, 20805 Ore Spring Road. I support the detachment on the grounds that I would always go to Ukiah. It's much closer. You know, why be sucked into the Fort Bragg thing when you don't need it, you know? Thank you. Have a good one. Bye. Any questions?
Any questions? Seeing none, next speaker, please.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bill Johnson. I live at 21520 Ore Springs Road. I've been there for 45 years. I'm also chief of our small little fire department, Turtle Creek Fire, and I have responded to calls out there, both medical and fire. The 3 medical calls that I responded to were serviced by Compshe Fire as a first responder, and ground transport was provided by Ukiah Ambulance Service. I have never seen an ambulance from the coast in our area. It is too far. It is 70-mile round trip. From Ukiah, it's about a 36-mile round trip. Patient care trumps all. You need to be taken care of by the closest medical facility, and that here is Ukiah Adventist. I love the Coast Hospital. I've had surgery there. It's a great establishment, but it does not serve my community on a ground transport situation. So I support the staff's recommendation and the detachment, and I guess that's what I got to say.
One moment, sir. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Ellis, and I live at 18125 Ore Springs Road, and I support the detachment. We get all our medical care from Ukiah, and just this past year, my husband was at the clinic, the Laws Avenue Clinic. I go to the Redwood Valley Clinic for my care. Was told that he had 3 hours to live. His oxygen level had sunk down to like 30%. He was stabilized in the emergency room and flown to St. Helena Hospital, where he spent 17 days. He's currently still on oxygen. If I were, the bullet rang a bell, if I were bitten by a rattlesnake, I could go up to my road and I could be right up there, and anyone on the road coming past, all these people, all my neighbors, would take me to the end of the road to the hospital. There's no way anybody would be coming from Ukiah and taking me if I couldn't drive. I have no phone also. They would not be able to take me to the Fort Bragg Hospital. That would just be ridiculous. So it just makes so much sense that, so it's also 80, from my house, it's 80 miles round trip to the Mendocino Coast District Hospital. And I do also appreciate the hospital. I lived in an apartment in Fort Bragg before I moved to our property in 1994 with my 4-year-old daughter. We had no cell phone service. Currently, we have a walkie-talkie that connects us to my neighbor. So in an emergency, I get on the walkie-talkie and I communicate with her, and she's able to communicate to the rest of the world. But like I said, we have no cell phone service at our home, but I could stand on my road and I could count on getting, if I couldn't drive, to the hospital in Ukiah. And that has happened before, when my daughter has broken her leg, she's broken her arm. You know, she's 30 years old now. And but I have a challenge, a medical challenge right now. And so anyway, based on all these issues, it just doesn't seem fair that we, and I also understand, my understanding is, at least I thought, that the ambulance didn't come past the 22-mile marker. We're at the 28-mile marker. But it's so close to Ukiah compared to Fort Bragg. Anyway, thank you so much, and that is my...
Okay, let me see if there's any questions of the speaker. Seeing none, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
My name is Craig Blenko. I'm a consulting forester who's worked in the County of Mendocino for the last 40 years, and I've spent quite a bit of time in the detached area. I have a lot of clients in that area, ranchers and non-industrial timberland owners. I've also been, for 28 years, a volunteer director on the Mendocino Resource Conservation District. I want to speak to some of one of the point which has already been mentioned, and then bring up a new point. I'll be brief. We've had over the years, when we're logging out in this country, and the other speaker referenced the lack of communication out there, and we've had accidents. People have been cut with a saw, logs have rolled on loggers, serious accidents, and there's no way that you're going to even think about calling an ambulance. You just have to get that guy in the pickup and get him to Ukiah as quick as possible. It's not even a second thought to think of Fort Bragg. So that is one very important thing that I wanted to mention relative to these relatively severe accidents that we have had to deal with over the years. The other thing I wanted to talk about is relative to the categorical exemption, which was brought up earlier. As a forester, we have to do timber harvest plans, and we have to deal with CEQA via the timber harvest plan process. The timber harvest plan is the functional equivalent of CEQA by state statute. Our plans are reviewed by the Department of Fish and Game, by the Feds, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, by National Marine Fisheries Service, by State Water Quality, by the state park sometimes by the county, and by certainly CAL FIRE. And I would say, based on 40 years of submitting harvest plans and going through pretty intense reviews about cutting trees, putting a line on a map relative to the issue before you right now, none of these agencies would blink an eye in terms of having a concern about that. So I think there's an element of keeping things in perspective here as well. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Barry Vogel. Since 1977, I've owned the property located at 20445 Ore Springs Road. That's at the 26-mile marker. Now happily retired. I practiced law here since 1974, and I speak for myself today. What's here before us are the issues about following the money. The existing tax on us is similar to the city of Ukiah charging property owners in Calpella, Hopland, Willits, or Fort Bragg for water and or electricity that they do not use and would not use. Following the money, which is a good thing to do. The hospital is a good thing. But the other issue about following the money arose today. And that issue has to do with the fact that the hospital board and its CEO are not prepared. That's their fault. That's not the fault of us who live within the area that should be detached. The fact that the Coast Hospital attorney just recently received some documents and responded to them is their fault. That's not our fault. So how does that fit into following the money? It fits in because of taxes. If this meeting is continued to the first Monday in November, that will be after the next tax bill is issued, and we will be responsible for that. And we would be responsible for that because they weren't prepared, and their failure to meet their deadlines and their failure to act on this, and the board that after they learned about it in January of this year should fall on them. It should not fall on us. So I have a number of questions for you. First is, there are 5 of you here today. If you vote to detach, or if you vote on anything, will it take all 5 of you voting, or 4 of you voting, or a majority of those of you who are present, since there are 2 people absent? one commissioner, there are three people absent. Mr. McCowan, Mr. Huff, and the gentleman who was sitting over here. We'd like some answers to those questions. As to the issue about is it Ukiah or is it Fort Bragg, I concur with everything that has been said in the past, that it should be Ukiah. We should have that choice. We should not have to pay for something we do not use and would not choose. Thank you.
Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none. Oh, wait. Mr. Shaw.
Well, this is actually for staff due to the comment about the next tax bill coming due. I don't believe our process is quick enough to resolve that this year because we have filing even if we voted in the affirmative today. Is that correct?
You could get...
I'm asking staff.
I believe it has to go through the Board of Equalization process, and it would not be completed by November.
It's
Okay,
it's
I
a much-
just wanted to get that answered.
Thank you, Commissioner Orth. That was my question, too. But I was going to ask staff after the speakers.
Withdrawn.
Sir, do you have a question?
Withdrawn.
Oh, okay. Thank you. No, I'll give you a chance to come back for any concluding remarks as well as the district. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Donald Hodge. My mother was Bernice Weger. My grandfather was Elmer Weger, out from Ore Springs Resort before it got sold. I'm the current owner of the property at 13051 Ore Springs Road. And I have a telephone. AT&T can't keep it working, but I have one. It's 707-463-1830. It is a Ukiah exchange. The property's been in my family for 5 generations. I'm speaking in the support of the detachment from the Mendocino Coast Healthcare District. I believe that the healthcare district tax is unfair taxation for people in the proposed detached area. I'm being taxed to support a healthcare district that does not support me. The simple fact is that my property is 13.5 miles from Ukiah, which takes about half an hour. It is 42.1 miles from the hospital in Fort Bragg, which takes about an hour and a half. To the best of my knowledge, no one in my generation or the previous generation has ever used the hospital in Fort Bragg. We have used the hospital in Ukiah for emergency care. If I need emergency care today, I'm not going to Fort Bragg. I'm going to Ukiah. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, sir, thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Stuart Marcus. I live at 21200 Ore Springs Road. I also own 21002, 2900, and 2905. I support the detachment. It takes us about 35 to 40 minutes to make it to Ukiah, to the hospital. It takes us about 50 to 55 minutes to go to Fort Bragg. We also own and run Echo Lodge Retreat Center. And overwhelmingly, the majority of our clients come from Highway 101 and not from Highway 1. And if we did have an injury at our facility, I'm certain that we would want to go to Ukiah, where it would be much more convenient to travel. We're also at mile marker 25. Any questions?
Seeing none, sir, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Terry DeSilke, and I live at 1180 Ho Road. A few of my neighbors are here today. I believe we are all in support of the detachment. I work in Ukiah, so I'm here most of the time if I'm not at home. I also harvest seaweed on the coast, so I know the time that it takes to get to the coast compared to the time that it takes to get to Ukiah. It takes me about 40 minutes to get here. It takes me about an hour to get to Fort Bragg. The only time that I have had to use the services of the hospital have been when my son was here visiting me and helping me to build a shed and injured himself, and there was no way I even thought of going to the coast. I know how long it takes to get there. If there's an accident or emergency, I knew that I needed to get to Ukiah. So that is my 2 cents, and I hope that you support the detachment. It does look like the majority of all of the staff report, as well as all of the people who live out near me, don't want to pay taxes that we don't use. Thank you.
Seeing no questions, next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Roland Sanford. I own property just adjacent to Montgomery Woods. I support the detachment. I think as the staff report clearly shows, and as you've heard today, the vast majority of people in the detachment area do go to Ukiah instead of Fort Bragg. I think also, as you've heard, ultimately, if it's a very serious injury, you will wind up in Santa Rosa at Memorial Hospital. And so in my case, if there, again, I'm closer to Ukiah if I were to get hurt out there. That's where I would go. And secondly, because of the fact that if it was a serious injury, I'd wind up in Santa Rosa anyway. Of course, I would head towards Ukiah. That's the.
Seeing no questions,
Okay.
thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Silverman. I own the property at 11,900 Ore Springs Road. Thank you, Lisa, for advancing this detachment because I think it's quite unfair for me to be paying taxes for services I will not use. 10 years ago, my partner had a stroke. He was driven. Ambulances were not an option. He was driven to Ukiah and flown to Santa Rosa from there. There was no chance in heck that he would have been taken to the coast. I'm really in support of this detachment and hope that we can move forward on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. No questions. Next speaker, please.
My name's Randolph Wood. I support the detachment. I live at 12,300 Ore Springs Road, and it takes less than a half an hour to get to Ukiah, and it takes almost an hour and a half to get to Fort Bragg, so there's no question that I would go to Ukiah. Thank you.
Seeing no questions, sir, thank you. Next speaker, please. Seeing no one else coming forward. Oh,
sorry.
That's all right, sir.
My name is Ray Medley. I live at 15701 Ore Springs Road, surrounded by Montgomery Woods State Park. About 12 years ago, one of my sons had a major seizure, and we had the helicopter come out. He came out, took him right into Ukiah, and it was done quick like that. It would have been forever getting out to the coast, and it just simply doesn't work. And that's all I have to say.
Seeing no questions, thank you, sir. Next speaker. I'll ask one more time, next speaker. Seeing no one come forward, at the discretion of the chair, I'm going to ask the applicant's representative to come make final comment. You will have no more than 3 minutes, and I'll also do the same of the district. State your name for the record.
This is Lisa Weger. I just had 2 clarifications about questions that were asked. The first clarification that, or statements that were made. The first clarification I wanted to suggest that you look at the third attachment to the staff report. The third attachment was prepared in July of this year. It was written by and signed by Mr. Wayne Allen, who was here earlier. He is the CEO of the hospital. And so it's a 4-page document, memo, stating the reasons that the hospital objected to the detachment. I would also then refer you most recently to the September 21st memorandum, that the notice of public hearing that clearly went to the hospital. In there, it clearly states that this hearing was forthcoming, and it also states very clearly that the proposal is exempt from the from California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to section blah, blah, blah. I think it's a little disingenuous to suggest that the hospital was taken unawares when they received the full staff report. All of this information has been not only given to them, it's been responded to by the CEO. The other issue I wanted to address is you were talking about property taxes. I maybe didn't make this clear to other landowners here, but the property tax bills for 2019, 2020 have long ago been determined. They'll be coming out. We will be paying this assessment, the Measure C assessment, for this coming year. However, if we don't have an approval into the Board of Equalization, believe it or not, by sometime in November of this year, then we will still be paying on the 2020-21 tax year, which seems, really a little burdensome in this effort. I believe that we can still make that deadline by the postponement early next month. However, I think if there were any additional continuances, then we would again have to pay for the following year. Did you have any additional questions of me?
No, I don't see any.
Okay.
And your time is up.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the consideration.
The district can come forward. No, you have 3 minutes.
In summary, I continue what...
State your name for the record, sir.
Hello? In summary, I continue what I started with, that the...
Your name.
That the district...
Sir, can you give us your name?
Pardon me?
Can you state your name again for the record?
I'm sorry. My name is Wayne Allen. I'm the CEO at Mendocino Coast District Hospital. I live in Fort Bragg. And for the record, the district respectfully requests that the hearing be continued for at least a month, where we can do our due diligence on the staff report, and I can have a meeting with the Healthcare District Board to formulate their decision about the staff report, and we can reappear at a future hearing date.
Okay, thank you, sir. Right, seeing no, they'll take care of that. Did you find the speaker there? Okay. All righty. Now the matter is back before the commission, and the public hearing is not closed, commissioners. I'd like to go to staff. There were some questions raised. Do you have a response? And I think one was the tax bill, and that's been clarified. But I believe that was mainly the only one. But do you have any final comments?
I believe there was a question about a time and distance study. I am certainly not an EMS system expert. So in analyzing this application, I reached out to Coastal Valley's EMS agency, who is the LEMSA for Mendocino County, and I worked with them. The data that is analyzed and provided in the staff report was supplied by them and their consultant, and I'm happy to reach out to them again and ask specifically about this type of a study and the relevancy to this application if you desire for the next meeting. But yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I believe the fire chief of Comsey is also under that EMS agency and has access to that same information. So if he wants an answer, if it's the same source that our staff would go for, Comsey is also associated with Coastal Valleys. So I think that department can provide that answer if it's relevant to the proceedings here.
And also, for the public, the particular figures we're talking about are found on the staff report, or the packet report, I should say, page 20 of 84 and page 21 of 84.
Madam Chair, a question for staff.
Yes, sir.
Maybe I've missed it in the report. This detachment and taxable funds that would normally go to Mendocino Coast District Hospital, in this process, would these properties that are in the detachment automatically get absorbed in tax for Ukiah Valley? I mean, we're not. What happens to their taxation? I didn't see that in the report. If they are that much closer to the other district, are they becoming a part of that district, or are they a non-taxable zone?
That's a very good question. So part of that will be evaluated in the process with the auditor controller as a result of potential approval, running the numbers of what property taxes are currently going towards the district from the 1%, and then what percent would go back. I believe it would be potentially to the county, because I don't believe it, the Ukiah Valley Fire District, I don't believe provides that ambulance service. I think it's private providers, MedStar and
It
Vera
is
Health.
for Ukiah Valley.
Okay, so then that would get worked out through that process with the auditor controller, and so we don't have that data up front, unfortunately. I will reach out again to them to see if it's possible to get a little more clarity on that for the next hearing, or for the continuance, just to give you guys some more information. But we don't have that at this current moment. I apologize.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I see a gentleman out there, but I know where it's up here right now. I kind of wanted to make a motion to follow staff's recommendations to.
Okay, there would be no motion
We would just
until after the public hearing is closed. If we're going forward, there is a question and about a continuance of the public hearing to our next meeting on November 4th. Is that correct?
Correct.
And it also has been, I believe, recommended that we do that by our legal counsel, who is out of the country at this time. So I'm leaving it. It would not be a motion. What it would be a consensus of the commission, whether to continue the public hearing or whether to go forward with our process and close the public hearing, and then the matter is before the commission itself. Yes,
I
Commissioner?
would recommend that we continue to the next meeting, with also noting that we've had 14 speakers talking for the detachment.
Commissioner Orth?
Yes, I'll just make a comment about the use of school districts for boundary consideration. I was involved in the early 1990s with the census and reforming the districts for the supervisoral districts, which are voting districts, which we did use the school districts at that time to change boundaries that were testified as having been gerrymandered for the purposes of guaranteeing to supervisors their continuance of their seats. So there was good common sense to use school districts to show where communities actually existed. For taxation purposes, it is quite different. This case illustrates that, and I'm glad to have this case come before LAFCo. We haven't had a detachment of this nature come before since I've been on LAFCO, and it certainly educated me for the difference between taxable districts versus voting districts.
Commissioners?
Just one more comment. There was a lot of discussion that Commissioner Gonzalez's comment brought up, and I just, as a former paramedic, retired Coast Life Support, transports from any kind of medical or trauma scene is strictly going to go to the closest appropriate facility. We've heard Fort Bragg, we've heard Ukiah, we've heard Santa Rosa. It's going to go wherever it needs to go. Weather's a factor, distance is a factor, capabilities of each of those facilities at any given time. We've had facilities that have equipment down that make them not a receiving facility. So I just want to reassure the public that this commission is aware of your concerns, but I want to make sure everybody understood that transportations for emergency calls are going to go to the closest appropriate facility. Thank you.
So, commissioners, we need to make a decision, but not by motion. It would be by consensus of how we move forward with this public hearing process.
I support a continuance.
I support a continuance.
I support a continuance.
I would like to see this move forward. I support the application. I think process has been done.
And so I think it is a majority consensus of this board. Earlier, there was a question as to whether we have a quorum. We do have a quorum. I checked on that first thing.
Madam Chair, point of order. Did you weigh in on that question you asked of us?
What's that? Yes, I did.
Okay.
And actually, I side with you, but it's a 3-2.
Okay.
And the chair will recognize the majority of the commissioners. However, I do take this very seriously, and maybe a continuance is the best in this instance, and a benefit to all based on our legal counsel asking that we continue until he can be here and go over the letter that was sent by the district as to proper procedures. I think proper procedures have been followed, but I'm not a lawyer and can read all the state code. There are official procedures that we must go by, and so to continue it probably is a benefit to all of us. So the chair is going to continue the public hearing to November 4th. Shortly after 9 a.m., it will be on the agenda for that particular meeting. And for those of you that are here and have driven long distances, your testimony will continue to be taken into consideration. Any of the commissioners can go back on the video and rehear your testimony. Sorry, you possibly cannot make it back on November 4th, but we are going to move forward now on our agenda as we have continued this public hearing process. Okay, thank you. And actually, we're going to go to a 10-minute break.
Well, thank you, Carrie. I didn't know that. I'm sure if we needed a motion to continue this or not, so.
We haven't had a response from our
forward to item number 7, matters for discussion and possible action. And we have 7A, alternate public member recruitment. Everybody's looking at Carol. Okay, staff, who's going to
Thank you.
begin the discussion?
Thank you. This is just an informational report to the commission advising that Commissioner Rosenberg's term as the alternate public member ends at the end of this year. So we have started the recruitment process. On September 19th, we posted the notice of vacancy for that seat and have publicized it in the newspapers. The due date for that is, for any applications, is October 28th. And to tentatively hold interviews or consider appointment at the November 4th or December 2nd meeting.
Okay. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next item, and that is 7B, CALAFCO dues structure proposed changes.
Thank you. This is a continued discussion of the CALAFCO proposed dues increase from last meeting. As a reminder, the California Association of Local Agency Formation Commissions is our statewide organization that provides education and advice to LAFCOs throughout the state. All LAFCOs are currently members of CALAFCO. Some of the benefits to the LAFCOs are the participation in the conferences, the annual conferences. They also have staff workshops, which we have consistently participated in, and they provide annual or classes, periodic classes that benefit LAFCO staff. Currently, CALAFCO is funded by members' dues, as well as the annual conference and staff workshop items, the registration fees for those. So while the member dues are considered a reliable source of revenue for the organization, the conference and workshop registration fees are dependent on their success. One of their stated reasons for this new due structure was that if one conference or staff workshop were canceled in a year, it would severely impact their annual budget. So they've been meeting, they had an ad hoc committee that has met for the past year, and they came up with the due structure that is proposed, which is a $1,000 base, and then a per capita increment on top of that. At the bottom of page 50 of your agenda packet is the summary of the dues that Mendocino LAFCO has paid since 2017-18. And as Commissioner Ignacio requested, also in the agenda packet is the previous years and the breakdown by county, and that is on page 57 of your agenda packet. So the population, the proposal that has been put forward by CALAFCO has a population factor that is capped at a population of 700,000. Which had been discussed throughout the year and proposed. The other consideration was a population cap of 1 million, but this one was put forward by the Board of Directors. So staff, as requested, staff did reach out to a number of LAFCOs, including Butte, Lake, Humboldt, Plumas, Modoc, Sonoma, and Lassen counties. All have generally been in support of the new structure. Butte LAFCO staff are generally in support and will be recommending approval with revisitation of the structure next year. I will note that Ventura LAFCO is proposing an alternative structure that they will be presenting at the annual business meeting. I don't know what that is yet. It sounds like there will be robust discussion at the annual meeting. So staff's recommendation is to provide input to the voting delegate and alternate, and then to consider authorizing the delegate and alternate to consider recommendations of the commission as well as testimony given at the annual meeting.
Okay, and I did inquire at our Rural Counties Association annual meeting. Many of the small counties, it was financially not that big of an increase, but the medium-sized counties, like Mendocino, it was a huge increase. And
More than double.
yeah, and so I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody was really, because it's not their LAFCo, and their LAFCOs need to meet and decide on this. And some, it came as a surprise because they hadn't received any information yet, and some it wasn't such a surprise. And that had to do with whether you have a seat on LAFCO or you don't have a seat on LAFCO. And I didn't know, I just asked of my colleagues that were at the annual meeting. And unfortunately, Commissioner McCowan's not here today. He had another commitment, and he will be our voting delegate. So anything that we discuss or give direction will then obviously go to him, and he can also review the video of our conversation. I, for one, just want to ask the question, and our executive officer somewhat answered it, saying that all the trainings that CALAFCO puts on for staff of LAFCOs throughout the state, and then also it's the annual meeting. CALAFCO is the place to go when you have some questions, and whether it be legislation, they do keep an eye on that. They do a lot of work that if we weren't a member, we would have to do ourselves. So anyway, the question is, does every LAFCO need to be a member? I do not believe they have to be. Correct?
They will continue on as long as they have enough support to do so, is my understanding. My understanding is also that the reason that this was revisited was to both stabilize their revenues for their budget, and they were also hearing a lot of concern from the larger counties, the more populated counties, who felt that they were bearing the burden of the dues.
Well, to put a cap of 700,000 on how many million that some of these urban counties have, I think it hit me as being unfair. But on the other hand, I can also understand it, and maybe to much of our benefit if you're a rural county or a suburban county. When the main dues come from the big urban counties, maybe they get all the attention. Where you stabilize it, make it more equal, then we all have the same advantage. But I'm still, the cap is just, I can't believe it.
Well, it seems, if I may,
Yes.
It's the small counties that need LAFCO the most. Because we have the most questions and we have the least staff to do the research on it. The larger counties can do that kind of research themselves and probably have staff people to do it. We are really dependent on LAFCO. So the question to me is not should we belong to LAFCO or not, it's really convincing LAFCO that that doubling our membership in 1 year is
Membership dues.
Membership dues is an unfair burden.
Just a point, we're talking about CALAFCO, not LAFCO.
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's CALAFCO, and doubling our dues in 1 year is an unfair burden, and yet as a small LAFCO, or I don't even see us as medium size, we are the most dependent on the organization for information and assistance. And I haven't seen them lowering, if they're increasing the amount of membership, are they lowering the cost of going to the conference? Because it seems to me if you're getting most of your money from your dues, then you should lower the cost of going to your conference, but you can't do both. I mean, you can't raise both or maintain both. So I think there's a number of questions that, and have we talked to the folks that are running for office as the northern representative to see what their standing is?
Actually, can I answer that?
Yeah.
If you look at the officers, or the board of directors, and from the rural county, we just heard our executive officers say Butte County is okay with it, and they are moving forward. Bill Connolly, the incumbent that's up for election to the board of directors, is Butte County. He's from Butte.
Okay, so I would see finding a candidate for the officer that happens to think the same way we do.
Well, that's another item, and you can bring it up at that time, but
Okay.
right now, we're talking about due structure. And I did have one individual at the rural county's annual meeting that said that for rural counties, and you're talking about our dues more than doubling, that we always received a lesser fee. And that also was something to be considered, that we hadn't paid our really fair share any of the small-sized counties. There was a special consideration given. So that also raised the bar of a new due structure.
Yeah, I support remaining with CALAFCO. They have provided this agency support in the past, and I'm sure they will in the future. I don't think the population cap is reasonable, though. I see that the way they address it is we will address it in each budget year. They will readdress the population cap. Well, I think, and I would recommend that we vote no for the recommended action with that population cap and support the alternative with the higher population cap for this meeting. And that way we would register that we are not in full support of the population cap this year. And hopefully that will then play into next year's budget consideration if we fail this year, but at least we will be on record of having felt that the population cap of 700,000 is a number too low. It should be at least 1 million, because all these counties that are using that population cap have 1 million plus. And population, we use that for the fire districts. We looked at a base rate and a population for distributing money, not charging it. So I kind of guess it's a little reversal there in the way the fire districts are using the same concept. But I do support the concept of a base with a population charge. I think it is a reasonable methodology. I just think their numbers aren't as reasonable as the methodology allows.
Madam Chair, following up to that, I would support Commissioner Orth's recommendation as well for support of an alternative, but I would also suggest that just as much as the larger counties benefit from the 700,000 cap, that there should be an establishment of a minimum base of counties have to have a population of, say, 125,000 in order to even qualify for that additional $1,000 base. That those counties that don't even have 125,000 would be exempt from being charged that base, because it is about the money, and it hurts these rural counties that have a much smaller population base.
Commissioner?
I just want to say at the last CalAFCO where I was a voting member, I mean, the issue came up, and I get that they need to have, I guess, a better reserve or whatever in case something happens. I don't get that. And I also get, like Carol pointed out, it will reverberate through as we set our rates for our member agencies. So it's not something that we can say it's not affecting us, because we're not in the business of making money here, we basically get money from all our folks here in the county and then adjust our rates accordingly. So I agree with what Commissioner Orth said in registering our complaint, but I'm not looking at getting out of CALAFCO.
Can we get an advance copy of what Ventura is proposing prior to?
I will try to do that. It wasn't quite ready this last week, but I will reach out to them and see if I can get that.
And then our representatives going to CALAFCO annual meeting are Commissioners McCowan, Orth.
I'm not going.
You're not going. Ignacio. So if they could get the advance copies to be able to look those over and being able to discuss it prior, I have confidence that we will come up with a good remark, statement, position based on what they do.
With Commissioner McCowan at the helm, I'm sure we'll have great remarks.
Yes.
Looking at the numbers, Butte County has 221,000 people, and we have a little more than 87,000 people. So they have more than twice our population. And
Understand.
And I think for them to say this is fine is a lot easier than it is for us.
Okay. I think that is enough. I don't know if you want to do it by motion to give our delegates an opportunity to hear the speakers at the Board of Directors meeting, or the business meeting, I should say, and to discuss the Ventura proposal. And basically, our 3 delegates, leave it to them to decide how to go forward. That's where I'm coming from.
I would recommend that would just be a direction for staff to forward that information to the delegates.
That works for me. It appears it works for everybody. Okay, moving forward on our agenda, item number 7C, and that is CALAFCO 2019 Board of Directors elections. Do you want to do a
I can give a little recap.
introduction?
Sure. This item is an opportunity for the commissioners to discuss and weigh in on nominees for the two vacancies on the CALAFCO Board of Directors for the Northern Region. There's a county seat that will be coming up and a district seat. For the county seats, there's the 2 nominees are Dan Miller, who's with Nevada LAFCo. He has 3 years with LAFCO. And Bill Connolly, who is the incumbent from Butte LAFCO, and he has 14 years with LAFCO and has been on the Board of Directors for CALAFCO for 6 years. For the district seats, the 2 nominees are Kurt Grundle of Penn Valley Fire Protection District. He sits on Nevada LAFCO since 2006, or I'm sorry, he had served a term in 2006 and a term in 2016. The second nominee is David Couch, who is with McKinleyville Community Services District and sits on Humboldt LAFCO.
So commissioners? Commissioner Orr?
For the district seat, it would be nice to get a coastal representative onto CALAFCO. I think they're more inclined to be supportive of issues within Mendocino County than the others, just because of the nature of coastal counties versus the inland counties. And I don't think we've had a coastal rep on CALAFCO for a long period of time.
Did he serve previously?
I don't believe so. I think that we had a...
Was someone else from Humboldt
It was someone
County?
else from Humboldt. Vicki Lake, maybe?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Supervisor?
A supervisor, yes.
Yeah, she had the supervisor county seat.
Anyone else? Commissioner?
I concur with Commissioner Orth's statement on getting a more local coastal for the special district.
Okay. I concur as well.
I concur.
I just figure they're Humboldt, they're as small as us, so maybe they'll take care of us in the other department. So, do we need a motion for this, or?
I think it's just direction to the voting delegate. Or recommendation.
Okay.
So it's a
So-
full concurrence. I concur as well.
Yeah.
The county's a little different. I don't think Bill was actually present during the vote on the dues. I think he missed that meeting, if I read my stuff right. But at the same time, someone who's been a long-term person, and I can see supporting the incumbent in this case, just because he's played this role. He's hasn't been a negative factor to Mendocino County, and maybe his ears will open up more so to us and our concerns by continuing to support him. But that's the way I see it politically. But other than that, I'm open to suggestions, and I'd probably waver if someone wishes to support Mr. Miller.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Didn't we just hear in the previous item that he's in full support of the coming due structure?
No.
Or did I
Not him as an
misunderstand?
individual. Tony, or Commissioner Orth just pointed out he was not present at that meeting,
Okay.
but that the Ventura LAFCo was, the executive officer indicated that the LAFCO board was in
okay.
support.
Thank you for that clarification.
But I do know both these supervisors, and Supervisor Conley is an excellent choice. Supervisor Miller, I know him as well. But I would like to support, in this case, I would like to support the incumbent.
And you know them, the man?
I know both of them, yes.
Okay, I will go with that as a recommendation.
Well, I'll just go on record as saying I'll support the incumbent as long as our reps give them a little earful about our.
That's a good thing in the caucus.
We're assigning that to John. Supervisor to supervisor.
Yeah.
That works.
So,
Yes, sir.
I agree with supporting Commissioner Conley. I think Butte County aligns itself a little better with Mendocino County than what Nevada does, being a little bit further away from the population centers. And also, they were hit hard by the fires. We were hit hard by the fires. Everybody's trying to get, places rebuilt. And I think they would have a lot more sympathy towards that than somebody that's hasn't had a tragedy like that happen in recent memory.
Good point.
I'd like to believe that someone with as much experience as Mr. Connolly would be able to listen to other agencies in the state and take that under serious consideration, those concerns that we have.
And I believe, knowing him, that he will. And being 4 or 5 term supervisor, I can't remember exactly, but it appears he really represents the people. And when you look at his background, he's an independent business person as well. So I think he brings a lot of expertise, and I've always found him very open and willing to discuss the number of issues, whether it's at the Rural County Association that we belong to, Mendocino County, or the other CSAC, the statewide that all counties belong to. I have sat with him on those boards, and he has always been very open to everybody and their comments before really making a final decision. So I find him to be very considerate. Okay.
So I'd support you directing staff to make sure our delegate receives these comments.
And actually, since you're 3 are going, I guess we're on to the next agenda item. No. There wasn't a separate one there, but I did notice about the caucuses. And even though your voting delegate goes and you have an alternate, you can all participate. You just can't vote in whatever their proceedings are. But certainly, they welcome everybody's participation. That's the way I remember it.
It
That's
is.
what I remember as well.
That's how it was last year, too. I believe most of us participated in it, and they were very open to it.
All righty, moving on. So now we are on number 8, information and report items. We'll begin with 8A, the work plan, current and future proposals. You know something? I've got 2 people in the audience. We had such a long public hearing, and we've gone through these matters that, do you have public comment? We really didn't take action. Okay, I do apologize. Shame on this chair. I must have worn myself out. Okay, work plan, current and future proposals.
Thank you. We have no changes. The Weger detachment application was, of course, continued to November 4th, so to next month. We're also continuing to work on the Russian River Flood Control District's pre-application request regarding serving Redwood Valley County Water District under a purchase agreement. No changes to the applications on hold or the future proposals. I will say that I met with Richard Shoemaker from Point Arena regarding the potential for formation of a harbor district. We have no formal application or pre-application at this time. As an update to the work plan, we have started the request for information and data collection process for each of the items on the work plan, the CSA 3, Mendocino City Community Services District, and the Ukiah Valley Sanitation District. So we'll be moving forward on these, especially in the coming month. The Weger application has taken quite a bit of time in the last couple of months, so we are working through those, though. I believe that's it for the work plan updates.
Okay. I do have a question.
Sure.
And that goes back to the minutes on page 5 of 84. And in last month's report, you said that the State Controller's Office noticed that 2 districts had not submitted annual financial reports. And you indicated it was Anderson Valley Cemetery District, failed to file, and the Mendocino Coast Healthcare District, non-compliant. So I don't know, can you update us on that, or tell us what our responsibility is when we receive notice from the State Controller's Office?
The notice, their request is for assistance in helping to contact those districts and to basically facilitate their submitting their financial forms. I did speak to the Anderson Valley Cemetery District at one point, and they have very limited, I won't call it staff, volunteers. And so it's been difficult to get in touch with them again. Now that we have a clerk on staff, then we can continue to reach out to them and see if we can get those financial reports. And that's an interesting question also because I believe that the legislation last year required that annual reports be submitted to LAFCo as well as the Auditor Controller's Office. So that's something that we'll have to look into as to how other LAFCOs are making sure that happens and then follow up on that.
And I might suggest as well that we do an update maybe to all our member agencies at some point, and maybe include that in the, giving the new legislation that's been passed, bill number, and where it is in state codes, so that they all know that that is the process. I think we should do that. That way that they receive notice, because they might not be aware. Commissioner?
Question for staff. On the two that didn't submit their financials, do we have a record where we sent them a letter passing that on, so it's in the file at least? So,
That's a good idea, and we will do that in the
okay.
coming
That way, at
week.
least we've done our part, if nothing else. Unless our new clerk's going to knock on their doors constantly.
We have spoken with the state controller's office on the phone and did help them reach out and make initial contact. But
I just figured if there was a letter in the
follow up.
file, then you've got it covered.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Question. Have Mr. Moore paid his back dues?
No, not yet. I haven't heard from him since our last update.
And it's actually not dues. It's a bill for time that he has owed us for a long time.
As long as you're writing letters.
Yeah.
Got that
Now,
to
it seems to me that if a person has not paid their bills in the past, one is rather reluctant to start dealing with any future work with them.
Is there any kind of penalties for the length of stay on his unpaid bills that are assessed?
We do not have a penalty system in our financial policies. What we have said is that we will not move forward on the application until we receive payment for that outstanding balance, plus additional deposits so that we can work against. And basically, when we get to zero on our deposit line, we won't do any further work in the future until we get further deposit to avoid that situation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to 8B, correspondence.
We have the, we received a SDRMA's President's Special Acknowledgement Award for having no claims. But other than that, we have no, no correspondence.
Although that does mean we get a 2% discount or something, I believe.
That is correct, yes. Good point, thank you.
Yay. Financial savings. Okay, I'll just ask again, any public comment? And it's actually only reports. If you do want to say something, just come forward. 8C, Executive Officers Report, and this is a verbal report.
Yes, thank you. We had a number of meetings this past month. I met with Richard Shoemaker from the City of Point Arena, and again discussed the process for formation of a harbor district. This was a follow-up to the report that was done by their grad student from UC Berkeley. He did we worked with him briefly last year, I believe, on putting together a kind of a feasibility study for doing a harbor district, or how best to fund the pier they have there. So I met with Richard and spoke with him on that. I met with the City of Ukiah to follow up on the area of interest policy that we have, and so we'll be working with them on that and how best to address agricultural lands surrounding the city. Also met with Mr. Nickel regarding the potential annexation of properties north of the Masonite site, and he is also has to address some agricultural lands issues in that process as well. So we're working through that. We've been working on the year-end financial reports in preparation for the audit, and those have been sent to our treasurer, Commissioner Ward, and he has reviewed those and provided some initial feedback. So we'll be finalizing those financials and sending those off to our CPA. And then we have our new clerk on board, so we've been doing training in office. And I think that's what we have for our report this month.
I would like to just mention, because some of you haven't been around as long as I have. Back when the City of Ukiah hadn't changed their sphere, I mean, it was the same ridgetop to ridgetop, Highway 20 to the north, and Burke Hill to the south. I think it officially says Highway 253. But agriculture was very concerned with that, and this is what you'll be discussing. And back in the day, it was suggested by agriculture if their sphere remained the same, that there be a right to farm ordinance passed by the city of Ukiah because of keeping agricultural land within their sphere of influence. So I wanted to mention that. And then also for the commissioners, I did sit on the City of Ukiah Growth Management Steering Committee, is what they called it, and that was for their general plan update. And they did downsize their sphere by quite a bit. And it was approved by the City Council of the day. And I believe some process coming before LAFCo, they never finalized their sphere of influence with LAFCO. And so some of our reviews and other business that has happened since that time, I do believe the City Council did look again at the sphere of influence and did make a recommendation, but I think it was delayed because they're waiting for some type of an update here and to combine them. So it was a shock to me as well that they went back to their old 1984 sphere of influence. And because I believe it's not legally defensible, and they're probably going to have to legally defend that if that is the choice to do that. Now, having spoken of that, City of Ukiah wanted to have more of a say in planning throughout Ukiah Valley and on planning issues with the county. And there were varied remarks, comments, and strong beliefs that the city should have. So at a very big expense, the county of Mendocino went forward and did the Ukiah Valley Area Plan, known as the UVAP. And the city of Ukiah participated all the way through that process. And I'm sure some of you know, sitting on city councils, how expensive it can be when you do just even the updates and the EIRs attached to them. But Ukiah Valley Area Plan is something that was done and done in conjunction with the city and at their urging for the county to adopt. And the only reason it didn't get adopted prior to updating the County of Mendocino's general plan is because if it had, then the update on the county general plan would have had to be consistent with what they did in the UVAP. And so the county chose to bring forth, even though it wasn't started as soon as the UVAP, they delayed the UVAP, brought forth their update to their countywide general plan, and then went back with the UVAP and brought it forward, and it passed. So I just, wanted to update everyone on those procedures and that history of what occurred. Yes.
I was at several city council meetings in which they talked about the larger SOI. And my understanding has always been that the farmlands are not included in an SOI. And also that an SOI should be what you actually plan to incorporate into your city.
Within the next 20 years.
Within the next 20 years. And Ukiah has not incorporated anything within the past 20 years, and therefore having such a large SOI seems counterproductive to what needs to happen. I can understand them wanting to be involved in county planning because so much of what happens in the valley affects the city and vice versa, but I'm not sure what would be the proper way in which to do that, and I'm not sure the SOI is the proper way to do that. So I'm really looking for more information and what other cities and counties have done in the past in regards to the communications. I mean, the UVAC is one way, but we never finished that, so I just want.
It is finished.
It is finished, and I wonder, I just think that the communications between the city and county probably need some work to make sure that the SOIs are more in keeping with what LAFCOs are supposed to ask from cities to protect, because we are supposed to protect farmland and open space.
Comment?
That is correct, that is one of the directives to LAFCOs, is to protect open space and agricultural lands, and we certainly have policies in place that encourage that, and also to encourage the exclusion of those areas from spheres of influence. I have reached out to other LAFCOs and used the CALAFCO listserv for that purpose to start the research on what other cities and LAFCOs have done in similar situations. So we started gathering information on that and looking at some of the options that are available. It has been proposed by a number of cities to do similar situations. The city of Elk Grove is one of them. Ventura LAFCO has processed some and has actually developed some guidelines for that. They also use the area of interest, and the city did some research on that and brought that forward at our last meeting. That's something that we could look into, and we'll be looking possibly through the executive committee meeting, maybe looking further at those as we start to look into the City of Ukiah's sphere update, which will be done concurrently or processed concurrently probably with their general plan update. So there are other options out there. There are mechanisms available for protecting agricultural lands within city spheres. It hasn't gone through LAFCOs very often, so it's kind of a newer concept, I think.
And also the Sustainable Ag Lands, what is the name? SALC.
Yeah,
Sustainable Ag
Ag
Land
Lands
Committee.
Yeah.
Is starting on their second part of their planning, and LAFCO is involved in that process as well. And I'm going to go to Commissioner Orth, but see, I knew if I brought up some discussion, I would encourage public comment.
And that's good. That's good. My question is areas of interest in once an MSR or SOI is approved with an area of interest, is it LAFCO who's notifying the clearinghouse that those areas of interest exist, or is it the agency who requested the areas of interest who thereby notifies the clearinghouse?
It is up to the agencies. The way we have our policy written, it is currently up to the agencies to be proactive. It is just a statement from LAFCO saying that we recognize these areas would benefit from additional increased coordination between these two agencies. And then it really becomes goes to the agencies themselves to work on developing an agreement for that area. Ventura LAFCO has taken it further, and they have some more teeth to their area of interest policy, and actually some additional structure that really defines what triggers coordination at what level of project within that area. And I think that's something worth looking at, and perhaps we could look at refining our area of interest policy. Our policy really mirrors a lot that are in the northern California state, northern part of the state. The one in Ventura LAFCO is much more detailed. I think they have more development pressures and have had to refine that some.
And I think it was the way that agriculture in Ukiah Valley felt back in the day, asking for a right to farm ordinance to be passed, and also wanting to protect agriculture from the increased development that is usually associated to cities. So, sir.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Thank you very much for letting me speak. My name is Phil Williams. I'm an attorney. I represent the city of Ukiah. Please don't hold that against me. I'm not that kind of an attorney, or I hope not to be. The city of Ukiah brought me on asking me, my mission was, I'm a former Army officer. My mission was pretty clear. Phil, drive toward a durable solution for the valley so that we can achieve a sustainable future. That was a mission I was very glad to take on, especially given that I'm raising my children just down the street and would like them to stay near mom and dad when they grow up. So in that spirit, and I was reticent to make a comment, but a couple things were said that I would ask us to be very careful, this body, to be very careful about commenting on the legal defensibility of a proceeding that is going to come before it. Evidence of bias can start mucking things up very quickly. So the intent of the city is to drive toward durable solutions. That does involve, it's going to be a rather difficult process, but it's imperative that we all leave as many doors open as possible until it's time to shut doors that are no longer constructive. So I'm only making this comment to make sure it's reflected in the minutes. With all respect, please be sure going forward that we're not commenting on the legal defensibility or the legal viability of proceedings coming before this body, and that goes for every other body in the valley. So that
I
being said,
apologize.
I'm not asking for your apology. It's not my place to ask for an apology, man. But we just need to be careful. So thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? All right, moving forward. Commissioners' reports.
Who is that?
That's Tony.
Let us know when you're back, sir.
Okay, 8F. And that is CALAFCO Business and Legislative Report.
Thank you. This is starts on page 78 of your agenda packet. I did outline a few. AB 508 was approved by the legislature and sent to the governor. This has to do with furthering the authority for the State Water Resources Control Board to consolidate or extend water services to disadvantaged communities. AB 600 has to do with amending current law as to disallow LAFCo, or saying that LAFCo cannot annex territory of greater than 10 acres if there are disadvantaged unincorporated communities in the area without considering their inclusion. AB 1304 was something that we followed up at our last meeting. That has been canceled at the request of the author.
Totally canceled?
The hearing was
Just the
canceled at the
hearing.
request of the author. Thank you. And AB 1628 was approved by the legislature and sent to enrolling, and that has to do with the definition of environmental justice. Those are outlined a little bit further in your in the staff report. There's also AB 1822, which has to do with the CALAFCO omnibus bill, making minor changes to the CKH.
Great. Any questions? And there may be sessions at their annual meeting that would go over the legislation.
They do. Their final session on Friday at noon, I think, is about their legislative update, where they give a more comprehensive update.
So you might just take this as this particular document as extra paperwork, but then you have some information. Okay. Is there any other business?
We have an executive committee meeting coming up.
Oh, we sure do. Thank you. All righty, sir.
I'd like to congratulate staff on their report and participation in today's proceedings. It was good to see you all, and very helpful, and I appreciate all the hard work you've done.
Okay. Thank you. And we do have an executive committee meeting coming up. Do you want to hold it right after? Shall we just start?
Maybe a 5-minute break to switch over?
Okay, that sounds good. So we're adjourning the LAFCo meeting at 11:30, and we will convene the executive committee in 5 minutes. All righty.
Thank you.